Hi there, everyone. It's 1 o'clock. We welcome you to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break on a Wednesday, along with Edgar Zazwata, ACSA's Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. I'm Naj and Edgar, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. We say good afternoon to you. Send us your questions and comments. Tell us where you're watching from today. Edgar, good to see you. How are you?
Good, Naj. No place I'd rather be here on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
That's good, since normally you and I are stuck in meetings all day. And here's, folks, I do have to tell you, this is how much Edgar enjoys this show. He has a meeting with all of our statewide directors for policy and legislative matters. He kicked that meeting to 1:30 because he couldn't miss today's show. That's how important it is.
Not sure how our members are going to feel about that, but yes, couldn't miss the show here. So good to see you, Naj.
We do have a pretty busy show for you today, folks. We've got a whole discussion on Proposition 15 coming up a little bit later on. Of course, your questions and comments. So definitely tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to say hello to you. Edgar, we've got a couple of topics that we wanted to cover, but I wanted to get to this right off the bat. I want us to rewind to last week because we had State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurmond on last week, and among the many topics he discussed new initiatives at CDE, lessons learned during COVID, and equity. He gave us a detailed description of the Philly cheesesteak, and this is a conversation that found its way into our chat, extended into the chat, and it became such a big deal that you got a text right after the show, correct?
He was serious about his deep Philly cheesesteak knowledge. He was not messing around, and he went back and wanted to make sure we knew he had those details. And if he promised that he would get back to us, and I think within 10 minutes in his busy schedule, he shot me a text with the Philly cheesesteak joint that he was talking about.
You have to admire that commitment, because for our viewers who may not know all of the machinations of it, he pulled off on the side of the road to jump on, and then he held his laptop in hand during the entire interview. So that's how much he wanted to participate in the show. But the Philly cheesesteak discussion, as I said, flows on to the chat. It goes later, and then you and I got an email this past Monday at 11:45 at night from our great member Daryl Camp, who is the superintendent at San Lorenzo Unified, saying that piece of our show last week was hilarious. That's how you know that it was impactful, when the whole conversation is moving its way over to the following week.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I love that people are able to consume this at their own leisure if they're not here with us live. I know people are able to get the information here throughout the week. So that was just a great example of that.
John, Amy, Angela, Shull, Maura, so good to have you on the show today. Welcome. Edgar, two things that I wanted to discuss with you as far as advocacy, legislative news from the Capitol, from CDE. First thing I wanted to ask you was about the budget, because we're going to talk about Proposition 15 a little bit later on in the show. We know districts were held harmless this year. You can analyze that and assess what hold harmless is, all day long. But as far as the budget is concerned, as we move closer through the fall and into the budget proposal time, there are a lot of things that are up for consideration right now, correct?
Yeah, just a lot of mixed variables in terms of data points that we're seeing. So on one end, the revenue is coming in a bit higher than expectations. So that's good. That's a good sign. I think that's something that we take some cautious optimism. On the other end, there's just so many unknowns. And I think this actually will be a good segue to our conversation today about what's at stake at the ballot, not just here in California in terms of revenues, what happens in Washington, D.C. in terms of control of Congress. So much of our budget, if our folks remember, is predicated on getting support from the federal government. If not, we're looking at some very steep deferrals, and what we worry about, that those could turn into reductions. So there's a lot. It's an understatement to say there's a lot at stake here over the next couple of weeks as we move into election season, and as the California revenue picture continues to unfold as we move to a January budget.
And Mina, good to see you today. Ken and Carol, good to have you guys on the show today. One other important topic, Edgar, and you and I, this hits us specifically because we are involved in youth sports. We're both soccer coaches, but there's been the discussion about youth sports and when it comes back beyond just the level of which it's at right now, because the state is all on these, different color-coded maps.
I'll finish Naj's question. I know where he was going with this. Right now, California is one of 3 states that's still restricting youth sports or high school sports. So we've been getting this question a ton from our members. What's the update? As folks remember, we had CIF director earlier this year to take us through what the update there was. They essentially push all the fall sports into the winter, into December, January. So now these conversations are starting again. Okay, now as we get closer to this date, is it actually going to happen? And I think the update on that end, we've heard that there is those dialogues starting between the CIF and the California Department of Public Health, the governor's administration. So those that want to see youth sports, and I think this is a big part of our students and our experience at schools, we want to see things progress in that level. So it seems we have some, again, the word of the day, some cautious optimism that we think may be headed in the right direction. So hopefully we'll have some updates on that front. I know that's been a question we've been getting quite often.
Cautious optimism being the 2 words we say for the rest of the year. Folks, we want to talk about Proposition 15 right now. This is the schools and communities first initiative. I do want to let you know, as we start this conversation, ACSA's board of directors has endorsed Prop 15, but we don't intend to make this a political debate or tell you one side or the other. We just want to make sure we have a general discussion. So joining us today is David Goldberg, the vice president of the California Teachers Association. David, so good to have you with us today. I want to go right to Proposition 15. The initiative would raise between $6.5 and $11.5 billion in new funding for K-12 public schools, community colleges, local government services. Tell us how all of this is going to work and what do educators need to know about this initiative?
Yeah, so thank you, first of all, for having me. And I hope after this week, they're no longer talking about the Philly cheesesteak. That means I've done my job. And we're talking about, hopefully, Prop 15. So this initiative, in the context of it, is it comes on just decades and decades and decades of disinvestment in public education and our communities. And it'll bring in roughly $11.5 billion per year. And the way it does this in perpetuity is by closing tax loopholes that have existed for decades, over 4 decades. And when we voted in California for Prop 13, we thought we were voting for retired folks like my grandmother, who had just taught and retired from LA Unified after 30 some odd years of teaching. So her property taxes would not go up on a fixed income. We never in our wildest dreams did we believe we were freezing forever through loopholes the property taxes on the biggest corporations in the history of the world. So we have seen a disinvestment, and so many of us, ACSA and CTA members, we're so used to dealing with this that sometimes the public doesn't know how bad it is. And sometimes our own members don't remember that we used to have free UCs, free Cal States, free community colleges, the lowest class sizes in the nation in California, summer program, summer schools, jobs programs. And so it's been decades of disinvestment. And this puts this money back into our communities and our schools. And to Edgar's point, exactly when we need it. If we don't get a lifeline here, we are looking at some of the most devastating cuts to the core programs that have taken, and it'll take us another generation to be able to respond to this.
David, first of all, just thank you for making time for this conversation, and always any time that we can work in partnership and be on the same page with CTA. I think we got to seize those opportunities. So often when we get some of these into these dialogues, there's the issues that we may not always see completely eye to eye, but I think this is one where the education community has obviously coalesced around the importance of some of these issues that are at stake. So on that note, I think it's an understatement to say that this year has been difficult for everybody, right? No matter what angle we're looking at that. And there has been the question from the campaign, from the political end, was this the right time? Obviously, this effort started pre-COVID, but this was the train was already moving. But that there has been some question about, Is this the right time to bring this forward? How is the pandemic going to impact the campaign? So just a long-winded way of asking, how are things looking right now? There was a lot of attention on polling and how much money the opposition was going to throw at the initiative. So kind of give us a lay of the land of where things stand.
Yeah, so let me answer your question about timing first. And I think it's funny because in debates we could put a couple links to a couple debates too in the chat. But our opposition before, when we had a surplus, we're saying this is not the right time. And now that we have this huge hole, they're saying this is also not the right time. When in reality, the way that this initiative is designed, by protecting homeowners, by protecting small businesses, actually allowing for the biggest tax break in a generation for small businesses, this is the exact right time. These cuts that are coming our way are devastating. If we don't get some money, and this initiative doesn't start, the spigot doesn't turn on right away, but if our districts know that there's money coming in the out years, coming our way, there'll be steady revenue based on property tax. This is the right time. It's also the right time when the fact that the folks who are 92% of this will be paid by just 10% of the corporations in California. And these are the richest corporations in the history of the world. And we could also share with you a report that lays out just who they are. And by the way, these folks have gotten richer. The richest billionaires in this country have made $300 to $400 billion more during this pandemic. While you and I and workers, we were lucky to get paid, right? Because we were able to push around that. But we know that working people, the families we serve, the communities we serve, have been desperate. It's the right time. This has $2 billion over the next 5 years for fires, right? Now is the right time to invest in this. And just taking another step backwards, part of the reason we're not able to open schools safely, which we all want to do, look, my daughter goes to school in LA. They have basically one functioning bathroom. How can you have a safe school with over 2,000 kids and one functioning bathroom? You can't even wash your hands. We have no testing mechanisms, right? How could the rest of the world is looking at us like, I thought the US or California, you all had this together. Decades and decades in disinvestment in our schools and our communities have made this such a dangerous time and made it so devastating. By making these investments now in this kind of infrastructure in our schools and communities, it is the right time now, and hopefully it'll even avoid some of these stuff in the future. Get these small businesses open in a safe way, our schools open in a safe way. Fighting these fires as well.
And folks, we want to remind you, if you have questions or comments for David Goldberg from CTA, please go ahead and send them in. David, both of our organizations have endorsed this initiative. With that said, there are critiques out there about Prop 15. Opponents are arguing that the initiative would lead to the biggest tax increase in history, raise California's cost of living, and impact small businesses. Give us the rebuttal to some of those comments, some of that feedback, some of those arguments.
Sure. And look, this is the opponents, and I've tried to debate them every time. First of all, they don't send the billionaires to come debate us, right? They don't want to have that conversation. They want to lead with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? That's what they want to lead with. They want to make this about small businesses. First of all, small businesses are overwhelmingly exempt. In fact, like I said, get a tax break. Again, 92% of this will be paid by just 10% of the biggest corporations in the state. And actually multinational corporations as well. The opposition, excuse me, repeat your question one more time. Yeah.
Rebuttal on all of the arguments, because the opponents are arguing biggest tax initiative in history, raising cost of living, impacting small business. I know that I'm hearing on the radio people that represent farmers who are very concerned about Prop 15.
Right. And the reason why farmers are concerned, by the way, is because the Farm Bureau has aligned themselves with agribusiness, the fertilizer companies, and the Monsantos against the interests of farmers. Farmers benefit from this. 100% of agricultural land, agricultural use is 100% exempt. The assessors know that. And again, they want to make this not about that issue, but this is a tax break for farmers. All their equipment and fixtures will be tax exempt. This is a benefit for them. But the other folks, they're always trying to also about raising rates. I mean, let's look at Disneyland, by the way, for example, or Chevron. Oh, let's look at Chevron. Well, who, by the way, would have to pay $100 million extra a year because they're paying as low as 5 cents a square foot on some of their huge land that they own. Chevron, If they're saying this is going to raise rate, then do either of you brothers, when you go to the gas station, you do go to Chevron station and say, give me the 1978 special? I don't think they're going to give you the 1978 rates, right? Or if I go to Disneyland, who just laid off employees, even though they've been paying their CEOs tens and tens of millions of years, do I get to say at Disneyland, give me the 1978 special ticket price? No. So there's no connection between, they've been sticking us with these prices for decades, and they're just pocketing this money. This money is going out of our communities, out of our schools, and it may indeed be the biggest tax, but that shows that money has left our schools and communities every single year for 40 some odd years. So they don't want to talk about the disinvestment in decades, over decades and decades of disinvestment on a yearly level. So there's not a connection. The people who are getting this money, they're multi-billion-dollar corporations. The Sultan of Brunei owns a huge land holdings in Beverly Hills, is pocketing that money every year and taking it to his other billions of dollars. There's another article that we could post that goes on. Just look at the San Francisco, just as an example, microcosm. Trump has huge land ownings in San Francisco that's paying 1978 taxes. So none of this money, it's being disinvested in communities and into the pockets of millions and billionaires. We're exempt. Agriculture's exempt. Residential, this strengthens the exemptions for residential. It makes it all clear, and it's targeted in a way that we haven't seen. This is the right time. And our opposition, again, and you look at who they're putting on TV, the NAACP head is getting paid over $1 million to come out against this initiative, right? This initiative, by the way, and I think we should put another lens on this. The disinvestment in public education, because we have to talk about racism, which lurks in the shadows a lot. It happened when our schools in the 70s were becoming more and more diverse, right? And that's when we disinvested. That's when this happened, right? When my grandmother and my father grew up in California, they got the free UCs. We built this infrastructure for generations of migrants to our state. We disinvested when our schools became much more diverse. So to have this somehow be turned on its head about, it just shows how they don't want to have the real conversation. And it's effective. They just want people to vote no. And get confused around it. We have to, all of us have to give an aspirational talk about what this means for us in our classrooms. That's our power for all of us.
Hey, David. So one scenario that we get, asked about this a little bit in terms of the education community. So even if we just take a look back at the last 10 years, and I have to say, CTA has been a leader in every one of these fights, which obviously benefited education. 2012. We passed Prop 30. 2016, we pressed Prop 55. And out of that, there's, and schools always are at the forefront of the campaign, right? Like that's front and center, every commercial you see, every, ad in our mailbox. Now more and more, I'm sure all of our text messages are getting bombarded. And that's a new way of reaching out to voters. Schools always at the center of it. Now, on the flip side, even though these initiatives have passed, we still struggle with school funding, with just how much. I've yet to meet an educator who thinks that their schools have enough resources, right? So how does this fit into the broader picture? Because I know that's a question. How much of a game changer is this going to be? What can we see into the future, assuming that this gets passed? How much is this going to help us? Right.
It's a great question, and I don't want to lie to folks, right? I don't want to have these expectations be so high, but I think you're right about. So just your questions on 30 and 55. I think we shouldn't underestimate how those stabilized our lives and the lives of our members, right? I remember I was an officer at UTLA. I remember the lines. We had to rent out spaces, the district did, for all the rifts that were going on, right? And that stabilized that, what Prop 30 and 55 did. Prop 30 and 55, what they were doing, they were an income tax. And we see right now, income tax can be very unstable, right? As people make more money or lose money, they can be unstable. What this does is this deals, and no one has been able to do it in decades, and that's take on the third rail, and that's take on the biggest corporations in the history of the world. That's scary to do, but we've also seen by what happened with 30 and 55. If we don't take on these scandalous deals, these biggest corporations get that none of us get, we all get reassessed. That if we don't do that, then we're never going to get what we deserve and our students deserve. The exciting thing about this is also, to your point, this is also investing in our schools and our communities. It's acknowledging that all of us are deeply impacted by, we're part of our communities, right? And our students are. If we don't deal with the most core issues, then none of what we do in education can be successful. And the last thing I'll say is just to be sober about it. I think Prop 15 is a huge move in the right direction. It's both important financially and symbolically in saying that we're now going to invest in California, the state that used the 5th biggest economy in the world. We're now going to invest in our schools and communities. But this, there are still huge issues around funding we're going to have to continue to deal with. This is a big step in the right direction, but all of us in California are going to continue to look at funding in a sustainable way.
David, a couple of our YouTube viewers very happy to hear your comments on this. Karen Kerr is one of them, and Lisa Salis-Brown, who's watching us on Facebook, a longtime viewer. She's very appreciative of hearing this. Angela Shull, who was watching on YouTube, asked the question, how do you soften fears from folks who are concerned that big corporations who will pay the majority of Prop 15 will in turn raise costs of their goods to consumers? Obviously, that is something that the three of us and all of our viewers and millions of Californians are wondering that exact question. Does the money end up filtering down to us?
Right. So we can put a couple things by some economists in the chat, as well as a study by Beacon organization that looked at this one thing and basically said the connection, for example, with rents. They say small business will have their rents raised, right? The connection, all of this, it's all based on demand, right? We have the lowest property taxes in the nation in California, and we still will, even after this. Just close the loopholes. But if there was a connection, right, you would think we would have the lowest rents in the nation, and we don't. So what is happening is that difference has been pocketed by billionaires for generations, right? So we've already paid our share. We've been nickel and dimed with higher sales tax, with bonds. You all know, and we know, we're constantly having assessments and bonds. We've already paid our share. In fact, our share of the revenue in the state coming from residences is now way higher than it was compared to businesses. And that was not the case before this initiative before Prop 13 and these loopholes passed. And so I think it's it's not an easy thing, because our opponents are invested in that conversation. But I think if you also look in, anyone who has a gut reaction knows that we are living in the time with the highest inequality that we have ever seen in the history of our nation, right? We have people in California, we have people sleeping a block from me, dozens of people sleeping on the streets, right? And yet we have the biggest billionaires, and more billionaires than anywhere in this country. So we know if it was already trickling down and they were already looking out for our schools, we're the 5th biggest economy, they should have already been investing in us. And we know there's a disconnect between that. And this is saying that has to be righted. So the long answer to this is the only way we have this is having these kind of conversations. We could put some more stuff in there. There's some more articles you can have. There's some good commercials that show this can actually lower our property taxes, because with the commercial property money coming in, the interest on bonds will be lower. So this is about really taking care of us. But so often these corporations get us to bid against each other, right? They disconnect us. Small businesses they want to disconnect the small businesses. They want to, these ads by the NAACP want to disconnect, even though it's good for working class people and people of color. They want to disconnect us. And we have to talk about connection and bring people together. And that's something that all of us are tasked with doing, is having these conversations. There are tons of resources out there to have it, but it's really incumbent upon us to really have a fact-based and really a based on our reality. Our gift that we give to this argument is we know what we deal with. We see what the kids come with. We see what our educators do. We see what the administrators deal with on a daily basis. And I don't think the public already knows that. And it's up to us to make it very clear. This is a pivotal moment for California. Do we invest in our communities and schools, or do we continue to make the richest billionaires more and more rich? And they don't invest that money in our community. It goes to their stockholders. It goes to their offshore holdings. And this is about investing in us. So it's a hard conversation, given that that's why it doesn't happen, right? That's why no one's taken this on in decades. To take on these folks, we knew they were going to have all this money. And to the Edgar's point, the polling shows we're in this. We are in this. It is a close race. Many people didn't expect us to be in this right here. You look at the PPIC polling, it shows us maybe around 50%, our opposition maybe around 40-something%. They know, and then there's a bunch of undecided. They know they want to suppress by flooding the airways with negativity that people just say, no, I'm confused about it. No, 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 no. And we have to tell them, yes, why this is an investment in us. That's our chore.
David, we just got a question here, and I'll try to abbreviate it. In terms of if this passes, how is the money distributed? And more importantly, what's the accountability on it? Right. Is it at the county, district level? So just broadly, what safeguards are in the initiative to make sure that the money goes where it's intended?
Great question. This is another part of cynicism that we really have to talk through. It's incumbent upon us to do this. And this initiative does this in some important ways. So there's really two pots of money as it goes to schools and communities. So the money that's going to be collected by the assessors, again, 92% of this is paid by 10% of the corporations, the biggest corporations. That's who they'll target first for reassessing that money. And we give them time. The other thing is assessors say, we can't do this. It's too much work. We say, you know what? Look at what we're dealing with. Look at what educators are dealing with. You can do this. You can make this happen. So when it's collected, though, the money that's collected that's going to the fire districts, the counties and cities, it'll stay right there. It'll go to the county boards. It'll go to the fire districts. It'll go to the cities. The money that goes, so that's 60%. The money that goes to the schools, the money that we're also very invested in, this goes basically to a lockbox. The legislature cannot touch it. The governor cannot touch it. It has to be on top of Prop 98. It cannot take the place of anything in Prop 98. That money then gets delegated out using the LCFF formula and comes right back to our schools. Every school district in the state will get something because no one is getting what they deserve, but it will be targeted around California's equity funding formula as well. When it comes back, and so when it comes back to schools, it's the same process as usual. We want to invest in democracy, right? So we may have struggles, and Edgar's pointed out earlier, we may have give and take, we may have disagreements, and that's fine. You know, how the school boards vote on this or how the counties vote on this. But this is democracy. We have those struggles, and we want to have those struggles rather than talking about who's losing their job, which programs are we going to cut. We want to have the important struggles. That'll be a good day to have those. But so it comes back to schools directly. There's reports made yearly on a yearly basis. An initiative says it has to be in plain English so people can understand how this money is spent. But the money is coming to schools will be coming back with the LCFF formula and go right to districts. And then we decide how we usually do, right? School boards, and we have those discussions and those debates there. The county money stays with those elected bodies. This stays with the elected bodies we have. No, there was no other third party dealing with this at all.
David, one more question from me, and just taking a little bit of a lens back in terms of just there's a lot at stake, goes without saying, here in 3 weeks or whatever it is at election day. Kind of aside from Prop 15, in addition to that, obviously there's Prop 16, which I know both of our organizations are also supporting. There's a lot of candidates on both the state and federal elections. So just big picture, what's at stake here in 2020 for public education? And what do you see and what's the hope as we move into a new year and how all this may impact our folks, our educators, and most importantly, our students?
Right. Great question. I did see too, just on my last follow-up too, we have a list of every school district, every county, and what they will receive. So we can make that look, we want to have a fact-based conversation, right? Because we think the facts win this out. So throughout this, we've been posting stuff. If you need to follow up with me, dgoldberg@cta.org, or you can follow up with the great gentleman here. We can all have this conversation together. But I think what's at stake here, honestly, is the future of California, right? We had a compact here where we saw education, social services, and housing is really part of our common good in our state. And we built this. We had the California dream. We got sidetracked from that. And I talked about some of the reasons, not all the reasons. But I think, if you look at some of the disinvestment, you also look at the Prop 187, the Prop 227, we had a moment where we turned against each other in the state, where we turned against, a lot of times, against the most vulnerable people. And it played out in a lot of different ways. One way it played out, because you mentioned Prop 16, right? That was another one of the initiatives that we're trying to undo now, right? But the biggest way was the disinvestments in our communities, in our students, and in working people, right? And so I think this is really giving a model. And by the way, this is no longer a Republican or a Democratic issue, right? We have totally elected California leaders who are all Democratic. but not even they have been able to get us what we deserve, right? This has to be bottom up. This has to be bottom up people like us playing the lead. We are trusted and respected more than anyone else. And we have to provide a vision for what this California looks like, where we take care of each other, we take care of our students, and we take care of our communities. And that's what's at stake. And in so doing, when all this craziness, all this, frankly, racism that's out there, that's really sweeping across this country, if we can provide that model now, before we provided the model the other way, right? We were leader really the other way. If we can now undo some of that with some of these important initiatives, I think it is a gift to each other, and it is a gift to our nation. And I think it's coming at the right time. So it's a lot that's at stake here. And that's why I really ask people to really, please, this is a close race. Please redouble your efforts. Your voices are respected more than anyone else. We have such a gift, all of us. So few workers, so few people have organizations like yours, like ACSA and CTA. This is where we have to take advantage of these organizations and really use them for the common good in the way that we have to really step up our game around. So please do that as much as you can. I'm here to be a resource, link arms with you. All of us are as educators. And so I send all my love to you, and really onward to victory as we can make this happen.
One thing that our viewers don't ever get to realize is how tall we are. Like Edgar and I are like 6'3", just to make sure that everybody knows. Nobody, unless you've seen pictures of David Goldberg, know that he is a very, very tall man. So tall, so athletic that he played professional basketball. And we have not had a pro athlete on this show before. David, you played professional basketball in Israel. I'm not going to ask your opinion on the Lakers because Edgar's a Lakers fan and he's going to give, all kinds of kudos to them. Can you tell us what is one thing that American basketball fans need to know or would enjoy knowing about professional basketball in Israel?
I feel like I now need to redirect this question to how great the Lakers are. Hate the game, brother, not the players. Look, so you're saying, what I think the main thing you take away after playing basketball, I think a lot of people have understandings or concepts about professional basketball, being a professional athlete overseas in a certain way. A lot of it is just a grind, right? A lot of it is just living in a different place, which was exciting. I did it right after college. It was the right time to do it. But it's also, it's a grind. It's a job, and it's really, I give my back to the Lakers. I give them so much credit for doing it in this moment, right? And really the NBA as well, the way they kept people safe for so long. That's what our schools need. We need to be as safe as the NBA was. That kind of investment in them should be made in our schools every day so that we can open safely. But I think the main thing is just what a gift athletics are, and really it's also about bringing it back to this conversation. It's really being able to look at each other, even when you're down, and say, we got you, brother. We got you, sister. We got this. We're going to come out and we're going to make this happen. And that is really this kind of moment right now where everything's on and I hope we do it. Dodgers, I hope they're having this conversation right now too. Have this conversation. We need you to have this conversation. But we need to really come out and have this conversation. So that's why I'm glad to have this with you all. We're here with you. Where we want to be here with you as well. You can sign up the phone bank through us, or you can do it your own way. But the most important thing is you start connecting with folks and do it early. Do it early, because the more the sin is out there and our opposition will spend millions of dollars on ads, they're going to want to just turn this into a cynical disconnection. We have to talk to folks now, really invest in these conversations right now. So is that a good enough redirect?
I love how you brought it back. I love how you brought it back.
Really good on that. David Goldberg, Vice President, California Teachers Association. David, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you both, brothers. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to working together.
Thanks so much. I will tell you that Gianna Miller, who is our social media star, is having a lot of fun right now about Edgar and I both being 6'3". But Aaron Chang, you're on the list now. Don't think that you're getting away with that comment. You're on the list now of people. Don't be surprised. We're coming after you for that.
He might not have a login next week. He may not be able to get on to Facebook Live. But.
He might be blocked. We're going to get our IT department on that. He's going to be blocked. Folks, I want to tell you about a really big endeavor that ACSA is about to pull off. No organization truly could pull off what we're about to pull off. And this is the 2020 virtual ACSA Leadership Summit. You can register for it, ACSA.org/leadership summit. Let me just give you an idea of what's coming up first week of November at Leadership Summit. Every workshop is available to you. We will also have live interactive events with the presenters. We have really, really strong, incredible keynote speakers. We will also have the opportunity to provide you with a platform to do Q&A with our keynote speakers. The Every Student Succeeding Luncheon, the Administrators of the Year Awards, 20 hours of live broadcast excellence for you during Leadership Summit. We do have a video. I believe we have a video over here. Michael Kelly, our executive producer, has that. Take a look. And there you go, folks. ACSA.org/leadership summit. That's where you can register November 5th and 6th. Again, 20 hours of live programming for you, as well as our workshops, a couple of ceremonies in there, some really, really great content. Edgar, you'll appreciate this. And for our folks that have lived here in California for a while, I'm going to sound like Cal Worthington here. And I'm going to put my Cal Worthington hat on as I say this. The first 75 people that register today are going to get the, what is this called? The Conference Wellness Kit. I have seen this kit, Edgar. It's not just stickers and a koozie. This is something really, really good. So the first 75 people that register today, right after the show, we're going to send you one of those Conference Wellness Kits. Hey, look, whatever we can do. Again, I don't have my dog Spot next to me, but Cal Worthington, I'm putting that whole hat on there for us.
You took me back to my youth with the Cal Worthington reference there. Love it.
All right, folks. Edgar and I are late, 8 minutes late for a meeting. All of his meeting attendees are saying, "Where is Edgar?" So we will leave it at that. Edgar, we'll see you next Wednesday.
Good seeing you, Naj.
All right, folks, thank you so much for being with us today here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. We, again, will see you next Wednesday. Have a great rest of the week. Great weekend. We'll see you next week.